Okay guys, in this video we're checking out another budget transmitter here. This is, well, it's labeled the Jumper TX8 SG, and actually Jumper does make a T8 SG radio that I reviewed a while back, but this one here is a little bit different. So the instructions that came in this one are actually from RadioMaster. This is actually the TX8, and I think what happened was they labeled this Jumper TX after they split off from Jumper, and they decided that was probably too close to the name Jumper, so they changed their name to RadioMaster. I think that some of these radios still have this labeling on here. The newer ones will probably say RadioMaster up here and TX8, but the hardware is all the same. This is all based off of the Jumper, original Jumper, the T8 SG V2 and V2 Plus. I think that's the yellow radio that I reviewed a while back. And all the hardware is the same. It's got the Hall sensor gimbals, got the 2.4 inch screen, running DeviationTX. If you want to upgrade the DeviationTX, there's a video from RadioMaster that actually outlines how to do the upgrade. It's pretty easy. I'll link that down in the description. I recommend that you do that. Now, actually, I went through the upgrade process on here just to figure out how to get the Crossfire to work, which is the Crossfire module back here. And if you recall the original video that I did on the T8 SG V2 Plus a while back, I got Crossfire to work, but only in PPM mode. But if you upgrade the firmware on here to the latest version, it does come with Crossfire support in the DeviationTX firmware. So let me just show you here in the model setup here. It's going to be right here. You're going to select Crossfire. Now you can't do any binding or anything in the radio itself. You have to actually use the bind button here in the back, and it's pretty simple to do. You turn on the radio, you press the bind button, it'll go into bind mode, and then you power up your receiver, and then you press the bind button, it'll start flashing pretty fast, and then you know in bind mode, and it should bind pretty quickly. Now in my case it went through a firmware update process, so I think that when that does that, it turns blue here, and then it does like a slow green light flash here. That means it's updating the firmware, and then it should stop and should turn solid. And if we just power cycle everything should be bound. So let me just show you that this is actually working. So we have a solid green light here and a solid green light here, and I did test it in Betaflight and it does work. However, it doesn't work out of the box, so very important to let you guys know that you will have to do a hardware mod to the radio to get it to work, because while it does have the firmware support, the pin in the back, so let me just go ahead and turn this off and I'll show you. You have to do a pin mod, and it's pretty hard to see, but you can see I removed the first pin here. Let's see if I can get that to come out. There you go. So the first pin I removed, and I ran a wire from the first pin to the last pin, and that sends a signal over to the last pin for the Crossfire micro module. And once you do that, it'll actually function properly. So while it does, I think it will support Crossfire in terms of the firmware out of the box. You may not have to do the firmware update, but I still recommend it. But it still won't work in Crossfire mode unless you do the hardware mod. And once you do that, it works in serial Crossfire mode and with no latency whatsoever. So those are the changes that you'll have to do. So to get inside the radio, it's pretty simple. There's 6 screws, 2 down here, there's 4 up here. Obviously, you'll have to remove the module. You'll have to flip this door down to make sure that the back cover will come off. But you'll also need to pop off these little covers here. It's pretty easy to do. You just stick a little clip in here like this, it'll just pop off. And then the 2 halves of the radio will remove, and then you can do the pin mod to these pins. Basically, you cut the first pin, solder wire to the first pin on the underside of these plastic, this little black plastic pins right there, and then you solder it to the first wire as I showed in the picture, and then that hardware mod will get the radio working in Crossfire mode if that's what you're interested in doing with this radio. Now if you don't want to do any of those hardware mods, what I recommend is getting the Jumper T12 Pro. This comes with the internal multi-protocol module, and you can obviously put the Crossfire back here, and everything works. This is actually my daily driver radio, and obviously this runs OpenTX. So if you prefer OpenTX to DeviationTX, then get this radio. But if you prefer DeviationTX and you want Crossfire, then just get this radio here, the TX8, and do the hardware mod, and Crossfire will work here obviously, as well as all the multi-protocol support as well. It's already built into the radio and DeviationTX. So that's pretty much it for this guy. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same. It's got the same Hall sensor gimbals, all the switches the same, the hardware the same. The screen is obviously different LCD than the yellow version of this one. But in terms of the build quality and everything, it's all almost identical to the original Jumper. Obviously, it's just made by a different company now since they split off from Jumper. It's like I guess they're basically two companies now. They're making the same hardware products. So can I kind of give you a preview of kind of what the new T16 or TX16S that's going to be coming out. I'm going to be featuring that pretty soon on my channel. You know, the plastic's a little bit different quality. It's hard to describe. They're obviously building this in a different factory with the same molds and same electronics, just a slightly different build, but the quality seems pretty similar. So I think we'll probably expect something as nice as this, or even nicer, on the TX16S that'll be coming out fairly soon. So stay tuned for that video. If you have any questions about this guy, let me know, and I will talk to you guys in the next one.